nice and sheltered with mama's pretty stories and your own made up fury. And mama gave me a magic clicker. Well, yes, I think it's true and fair to say. Come on in and listen, lost words you've been missing. All the fire you're bearing, the eye of the darkness, your light. So you were drawn to stories early on. My dreams would light up my imagination, and you had nightmares night and
Hey, what's going on, everybody? ChazmaN here, back with another special episode of the ChazmaN podcast. So we really hope you guys like Remedy video games, such as Alan Wake and Control. Because needless to say, I literally just finished Alan Wake 2, and Phoenix just the other day was kind of pestering me about wanting to do this, huh? Right?
What are you talking about? I don't pester. I gently encourage. So
No, really, Phoenix has been pretty good about. I feel like I'm the one normally doing the pestering. So when he was like, "Oh, you just finished Alan Wake? Why don't we do a solo episode?" I was like, "Okay, that sounds good." Over quick on screen, as always. There's audio locations there if you guys would like to hear us, and then also their social medias, and of course down in the comments, we would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on any Remedy or well, not just Remedy, any video game in general. So, gosh, this is very last second. I literally just finished the game. It is but maybe an hour ago, and Phoenix has had a little bit more time to kind of I don't know, kind of sit on things where things rest with that game, right? You finished it what, yesterday?
yeah. So it's been about a day to kind of process it and soak it in. There's a lot to this game. I'm very curious what your kind of final take on it was. I know you came into this game relatively excited, right? I mean, I know the first Alan Wake was high on your list of like top games. I don't know, was like your favorite game like of all time, or just like favorite horror game?
No, no,
Like,
no,
where
no,
does it
no,
rank
no.
for you?
It's like probably like in terms of just horror or of the sort, it's probably like a top five. Like I would put it up there with like the Dead Spaces or the BioShocks or stuff like that. Like I would say I actually prefer those over Alan Wake, but Alan Wake,
Mm.
it's a very to me it's a very special kind of whatever universe the Remedy, whatever they got going on with Control and everything. It's definitely interesting. I think that's probably maybe the most fitting word is that they are interesting games. Now, I think we'll get into it, but there are aspects of them that may not be for everybody, may not be for a whole lot of people, but I don't know, man. This game kind of similar to other Remedy titles. Um, it kind of has you going in one direction, and then it throws a curveball, and they really commit. I, I don't know how to better say it. Like they really commit to what they're going for here, and I will say like
Yeah.
I don't always agree with some of the commitment. Like I kind of hope they would stick with what they got going on, but again, interesting is that's kind of what I keep thinking in my head. What about you? What did you kind of overall take away from this one?
Yeah, and I think
Or I
that
guess
if
what
I'm
was
gonna
your
kind of
like
hit on just
connection with some of the other ones? Do you like them as much as I do? Like Control and Alan Wake,
so
American Nightmare.
okay, so I guess if I back up, so as far as the first Alan Wake, I think we talked about in the last podcast. I played part of the first bit,
You
and as
watched
a
it, right?
little
You said you
precur,
watched it more.
yeah, as a bit of a precursor foundation for anybody who's just popping into this. Although I think I've made it pretty apparent on the pod, I am not a horror game guy of almost any capacity. I've dabbled with some action horror games. Some of the Resident Evils I do pretty well with. Like survival horror is typically not my genre, so I kind of steer clear. I'm a bit of a baby when it comes to stuff like that. But if I go back to like prior Remedy games, like the first Alan Wake was creepy. It definitely wasn't survival horror. It was a little more action based, so I got more through that one.
I love that.
I ended up
Yeah.
stop playing for some. I don't even remember why I stopped playing. It's been forever ago. It was what, like 13 years ago at this point. I think I ended up watching somebody play, and just after I kind of seen the story, I didn't feel very inclined to go back and play it. But man, I enjoyed for the most part the narrative. It was very convoluted then. That hasn't really changed. But that was my first kind of take into the Remedy, game ecosystem, if you will. And the next Remedy game I played was Control, and I loved
Control
Control.
is great.
I think that's more in my line of kind of weird, creepy pasta is kind of game without being overly scary. Control definitely had that uneasiness to it. It didn't quite ever get horror, but it always left you a little unsettled. So I like that aspect of like a horror game where it's weird, it's a little unsettling or unnerving. But I'm not big on like jump scares and stuff like that. But Control, I think, found a nice little sweet spot.
Was it
So when this game got an, oh, go ahead.
was oh no, what I was going to bring up would branch us off. I was just going to say I kind of wish this one would have gone a little bit more in the Control direction. I feel like
Well,
I don't. Sorry,
I
I don't
guess
want
what
to
I'm
break you off of your thought, your trail.
Yeah, my point being is when this game came out and they said they were pretty much shifting genres into just true survival horror. I think based upon my experience with Control, kind of understanding that world and kind of what it was based upon, I think I was a little more game to try this out. Typically, if I was just a brand new survival horror game, I'd be like, no, not even going to bother. But I was already kind of invested in the world. Control kind of opened the door a little bit, so I was willing to give this a shot. I'm kind of glad this didn't go full Control. I'm glad it's kind of its own thing. Like they definitely have overlap, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, both narratively and
Mm-hmm.
like
Oh, of
theming and
course.
whatnot. But they kept these relatively separate, which I think is good. I mean, I think if they blur the lines too much, then what's the point of having Control as its own kind of thing? And like I think it's good to keep the IP somewhat separate and have areas where they overlap. So either way, that's kind of my background on the game. This, as I said, is probably my first true survival horror game. But as you were kind of getting to, one of the biggest, just if I'm going to pick one big positive that I want to take away from this whole thing, because I definitely have my criticisms about the game, I do really appreciate how all in Remedy went with this. I think that's kind of what
Oh,
you were
oh
getting
yeah,
to.
yeah.
Whether you say interesting, unique, however you want to phrase it, Remedy definitely has its. They found their footing with Control, I think, as far as kind of what their style was, how they kind of dabbled with certain gameplay elements versus this weird supernatural kind of creepy side of things. And Alan Wake goes all in on that. It also mixes some levity in there, some dark humor, some various over the top humor in some places. There's a lot of stuff thrown in here that I think if you've played any Remedy games is gonna feel familiar, but kind of on steroids here. So I think the terminology I've seen people throw around is this is the most Remedy a Remedy game could ever remedy because it's just very much them.
They most
So I
certainly
certainly
are like
appreciate.
they're a super unique studio. Like their
Yeah,
stamp is like it's a real thing. I think you know.
and I think that's what I like about this. A lot of games play it safe. I think that's where I'm trying to go with this. This game took some chances, and it felt like this real big creative endeavor by Remedy. This is the game they wanted to make. I don't feel like there were too many aspects of it that they pulled back on to be safe or to fit into some kind of box. This game is trying a lot of things. It's trying mixing some genre tropes, different narrative tropes from different like true detective side to the creepy survival horror side, but it's Remedy through and through. So if there's any one good thing I want to kind of come off the bat and say is I really appreciate just the creative direction they took on this game. I'm definitely gonna take issues with other things they did, but just to have a studio that felt free enough to do that, I think is a pretty big win in that regard.
No. I guess since you chose a positive, I will choose another positive. It was something I already liked, but I feel like this game did a much better job of making me like the Alan Wake character as a whole. Like, I feel like he's much more. They do a good job of making him sympathetic, but you also like come to understand that he again is the reason for everything happening here. And I don't know.
Mm.
There was a lot of good sections with every time they would revert to you seeing what Alice is kind of going through outside of you know of all of Alan stuff, and then you know how Saga kind of gets roped into everything. Like he most certainly is the super prototypical like flawed protagonist. Like but again, he's flawed, but all of the things he does that kind of ropes people in, it's like kind of for a reason, you know? I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Do you disagree?
So maybe. So I guess this is where I start having some negatives. I really want to come across positive with this. I think on our pod, I become kind of the negative Nancy of the group. I get overly
Yeah.
critical about stuff, and I definitely take some big issues with things here, especially when it comes to the narrative and the writing and the characters. So if we're talking about Alan Wake in particular as a character, I don't think he's ever really been likable. Even in the first
In
game,
the first
he was
game,
kind
he
of a jerk.
definitely in first game he was not likable. I definitely feel like they get across that like his time in the dark place as, I mean, as it would do, it humbles him to like such a great extent. But he also like
I suppose
he
he comes across to me real pretentious, even now. Um,
really.
Yeah, I mean, people are going to read it differently. But here's the thing, I think this is where I think I have a hard time kind of finding a balance here because I think a lot of that's very intentional. Like, he's supposed to be the pretentious, over the top writer. And what I can't tell sometimes, I don't know if you're going to agree with this, when he's speaking, especially in terms of like how he's writing his book, 'cause a lot of times his dialogue is what he's writing into his book, right? These short, kind of fragmented statements and
Hmm.
thoughts and sentences. Every time he spoke, all I could think of was if I had to read this book he's writing, I would go insane. Like, this is not the type of writing style I would want
Well,
to read an entire narrative
because
in.
I get what you're saying because he is so like, well, go figure, he's very by the book when it comes to writing everything. He hits every like major point that like a story is supposed to have, like to a T, where the climax is supposed to be, where the rising action is supposed to be. And then it's like, but it's like not everyone
I think it's a
writes.
little too on the
It's a
nose,
little
though.
too on
Like,
the
he comes
nose, yeah.
across. But here's what I guess I'm going with this. I feel like that's all intentional. Like, I don't know if you would disagree. I feel like his books and his structure is actually pretty poorly written. But I think that's a point. It's supposed to be intentionally, purposefully bad writing on his end. I think that makes it more of an like or maybe ironic character in a way. This famous writer who writes poorly, very kind of on the nose, kind of cringy. So I guess where I get a little lost or confused there is I have that feeling about the writing as opposed to how the characters writing his books. But sometimes I can't tell if that's just okay, it's them trying to make Alan a quote unquote bad writer, or if it's just bad writing.
To be
Period.
fair, he is in the story. He is supposed to be a representation, a physical, well, not a physical. He's supposed to be almost representative of like a Stephen King like figure, and that is the criticism people have donned or have given to
Yeah,
Stephen
it's a
King for
caricature of
years, where
Stephen
people are like,
King.
"I love King. He makes great books, but he kind of comes off as pretentious, or like I don't
Yeah.
understand what he's saying half the time," and it's just like, yeah,
He's a caricature of Stephen King, but when you take it to that level, I'd say it makes him. And I think it's all intentional. Like, and if that's all fine, I don't really have an issue with that. But I think sometimes, especially when you think about the way the story is structured, I have a hard time understanding. Okay, when is this just them trying to make Alan an intentional bad writer or caricature of Stephen King, however you want to look at it, versus is the story of the game poorly written? I took issues with a lot of the narrative stuff in this game. I don't know if you did in particular. And I don't know how far we want to go. Are we doing spoilers in this, by
yeah,
the
oh
way? I
yeah,
feel like at some point we're going to have to.
complete spoilers. Yeah, go take it away. Spoilers right here. Cut away.
Okay.
Stop
So
watching.
I won't go too deep yet, but here's my issue with the narrative of the game. It was trying to, I felt like I was waiting for the narrative hook. Like the game kept kind of pulling you on. Like they dropped a lot of questions. This game never resolved almost anything, or at
Not at
least not
all.
anything of merit. Like there are some questions that are answered, sure, but this game has very little narrative payoff to me, and that was very disappointing. And I get that
And
that's maybe
and
part
that
of where they're trying. Go ahead.
no, and that was something that I said I would be really disappointed by. I remember where I was like, I were this is like 3 games into their universe. I would like
Hmm.
to. I remember saying that before our last episode, where I was like, I would like to get some like concrete answers, and you get like two or three. And
And even them, their answers to questions that were posed in this game, not the big
mm-hmm.
overarching questions. So I guess my issue is I'm not opposed to a game having a
Who is Ati?
cliffhanger or being a little convoluted for the sake of, kind of messing with your head. Narratively, this game just didn't do it for me. Part of the narrative is I didn't think it was all that interesting in certain sections without going into a lot of detail yet. But I kept waiting, like, okay, this is where the narrative is going to take a twist. This is where it's going to do this turn. And it very rarely ever came. It would maybe pose a new question, and by the time we get to the end of the game, it just kind of ends. So narratively, I think a lot of at least the main narrative portion felt pretty
The
flat. There's some side tangential stuff I think was cool. Background lore stuff I think was neat. All the Alex Casey
It's
stuff, like
great. Yeah.
Yeah, although it feels a little disconnected from the main narrative in some ways. I liked the world building it kind of led to and the overlap kind of concept they had where like the old murders from the Alex Casey stories may not really be stories. They were based on real murders which influenced his writings now. Like there's some cool concepts there, but the through line of the narrative I did not enjoy. And this maybe is where I get kind of stuck in Alan's writing aspect of it too, because that didn't help the narrative, I think, flow well, if that made sense. So whatever narrative through line there was, his intentionally bad writing style, I think made it almost frustrating to follow
That's
sometimes. And maybe that's just me and my take on it.
that's exactly what I thought. Like immediately after finishing the game, my first major thought I had was that overall to me it's a bit of an uneven experience. Like I feel like the first what's Barbie doing there? Oh, that's that review.
Got an ad going. Oh,
Um to me it's a bit of an uneven experience. Like I feel like the game starts out awesome. Like the first 3, 4, 5 ish maybe hours are really great. I loved where it was going. And then like midway through it kind of I don't know, it begins to kind of just kind of float on and it sticks. And then
yeah,
towards the end, I didn't hate it, but I most certainly was not like in love with the ending of the
yeah.
game.
And to be fair, I think part of it is the structure of this game, which is both, I think, a benefit and a strength. Like, for those who aren't aware, after you get past a certain
Duel,
point in the game,
yeah.
you basically have two stories. You have Alan's, and you have Saga, which we haven't talked much about Sagas yet, but they're two separate narratives. I don't know how you played yours. I bounced around a fair amount. I think I probably did more Alan first and then did more Saga towards the end, but I definitely flipped back and forth a
I
little
did way
bit.
more Saga and then Alan.
Yeah. Regardless, I'm curious how much that affects the flow of it, but like once the narrative kind of goal is kind of stated in the first few hours, there's no real change to it to the very end of the game. I think that's maybe where I felt very unsatisfied is like there aren't too many big hooks that shift things too much until like the very, very end, and when both campaigns kind of merge again, do you get any real movement in the campaign? I mean,
Hmm.
each track is answering some mini questions, but never getting there. It's always like another barrier they're having to get past, another barrier they're having to get past, and then they get to the end, and the game just kind of steamrolls to the
Well,
conclusion,
well,
which is
like you're
pretty
saying,
unsatisfying in my opinion.
well, like you said, they answer, in my opinion, they answer almost everything completely in terms of the Saga character. But it's like she is like just introduced in this game, whereas
Yeah,
Wake is the main guy of the games, and he gets almost nothing answered. So it's like they introduce
they answer the
Saga and
stuff
they
that doesn't really
complete
impact
everything with
the
her.
whole
Yeah,
story.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and so I guess to give a little detail for those who are listening without, I think, maybe spoiling the entire game, Alan's whole thing is he's still trapped in the dark place. They've got Scratch or the dark entity, whatever they're kind of phrasing him as, still tracking him down. So their whole thing is Alan's got to
we
escape and hopefully defeat.
still don't
Hmm?
know what Mr. Scratch is. We know he's some sort of supernatural entity who's trying to claw its way from some other dimension into our world or the real world, and that's all we
Right.
know. And for goal is
And
to
technically, that's we knew that in the
yeah,
past
we
games,
knew
like
that in the
since
first game.
American
Yeah,
Nightmare, we already knew that. We still don't know really any bigger motivations. We still don't know a lot about the Dark Place. We know a little more. But I guess my point is, a lot of those narrative structures that are still hanging in Alan's storyline are
not
still
really
pretty much
answered.
there. Saga, yeah, she came in. Her whole thing is she's trying to track down this cult because there's some murders, and there's some stuff affecting her personally with like her family. But the cult stuff gets answered, but it doesn't really matter. Like the cult doesn't really have a huge bearing,
Mm-mm.
at least in a very direct sense, to the overarching
They're kind
narrative.
of the
Like
red
there's
herring of the first few acts of the game, or for
right,
not even first, maybe for the first half. First half,
yeah,
they're
and I think
like
this is it's hard to say because it really depends on how you play the game, right? If you play a lot of Saga first, then that gets wrapped up maybe earlier on. For me, I didn't finish Saga's quest till kind of towards the end of things, so that felt a lot more prolonged, the cult
mm-hmm.
thing. So when they finally resolved the cult at the very end, I felt even more dissatisfied by it because that part of the story was stretched out a little longer. I guess the point being is they answered questions that ultimately don't have any big overarching impact on the main narrative, which is the Scratch stuff, the Darkness stuff, the stuff pertaining to Alan Wake.
Did
And even some of the Saga stuff does not get answered. Like, you notice that, right? Like her stuff about her daughter. So for those who once again want to know a little more about the story, the issue is Saga comes in and she left her daughter and husband back home while she goes off in this investigation to chase after this cult. But then the writings that Alan, quote unquote, might be
because he
writing
needs a
is into being
protagonist,
Scratch.
and he needs a protagonist
Yeah,
who is motivated to help him fix the story. So that's why he writes in Saga. That's why he writes
it
in the
writes
husband
in
and daughter,
Saga.
because Saga needs a reason to help him. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, he like brings this poor woman and her family into the story, which
Yeah, and basically rewrites her history. So her daughter has died. She's now divorced from her husband. Kind of ruins Saga's whole life.
mhm.
And then at the end of the game,
Was it a life
her and
though?
Alan work together.
She
Well,
wasn't.
that's the
She
point.
probably
Like
wasn't a
the
person.
one. Well, this is the point. The one interesting aspect of her whole storyline was, okay, is she able to rewrite her story and get her original life back? The game ends on a big cliffhanger. Like her and Alan resolve the ending of the story to hopefully, defeat Scratch, at least temporarily.
And she still
And
can't
then
get
at
a
the
hold of her
end,
daughter. Yeah.
yeah, at the end, it leaves her trying to call her daughter to see if she's now alive after this story's been rewritten. And the game just ends with the phone ringing. So it's a cliffhanger. Some people like that kind of thing, but the fact that that was the only real big important question to her storyline, at least to me, felt very
Did you get?
unsatisfying.
Did you get the other kind of major thing that they kind of? I mean, I thought it was pretty obvious, but did you see the whole connection with her and Mr. Dorr? You kind of got
Yeah,
that.
it's her dad.
It's her dad. Yeah. Yeah. Basically,
Yeah,
they kind of say that that's why. Because I was actually upset. I was kind of going the way of Mary Sue, where she's like putting everything together and she breaks out on her own. And at first I'm like, wait, so Alan is supposed to be the main guy who has control over the story, but he wasn't able to break out himself for 13 years without help. But then she kind of comes in and is able to break out by herself without any help. It's like, but then they kind of answer that because Mr. Dorr, they would say it at the end, he is like some sort of interdimensional being whose main
yeah.
power is his ability to kind of walk in between worlds or walk in between dimensions, and I guess that makes
They
it.
gave her a lot of abilities, which I don't know how I feel about that. They are making her a little OP in some ways, but I don't know. I guess we'll have to see how they kind of play out her character towards the end. But I
at,
see what you're saying as
at
far as
least
making her a little Mary Stewish.
yeah, at least they do answer though. Like I'm at least happy. Like you at least know because of her familial ties with
Familial.
Mr. Dorr, so she can uh move in between dimensions, and then because of her familial ties with Tor, I think it is,
Tor
he
and Odin, the
Tor,
Andersons.
yeah, she's able to kind of withstand or fight off the dark place or
She's a
whatever.
seer.
She's a
She
seer.
gets the power of basically seeing into people's minds. That's the power the Andersons have. So, but okay, so even that. So she's basically in these two family trees, where these family trees have inherited basically superpowers. Why? Like, okay, so they kind of explain why she can do these overpowered things,
Well,
but
because
why does
Alan Wake probably needed to write because she's capable of things he's, I guess, incapable of, so he had to write someone in
I don't think
who
his
could do
writing
those
gave her the
things.
powers, though. I mean, I agree that he might have brought her into the story because of those powers, potentially, but I don't think that's the reason she has these powers. Like, she had these powers prior with Tor and Odin. Before Alan ever did, any writings, Tor and Odin already existed. The Andersons were already a family. And to my understanding, Saga is not a fake character. I think that was one of the theories that we had proposed is Saga even real? Is this Alex Casey even real? Looking into some of the lore, to my understanding, Alan can't create something out of nothing. He has to have something already there. So, like, Alex Casey was already a person. He kind of restructured his life through his writings to a certain
Hmm.
extent, but Alex Casey was already in existence. Saga Anderson was a person. Now, his
Now,
writings drew her to.
how much was already predestined about her? That's what we don't know. Like she may have been
Right,
a
and that's what we
person,
don't
but how
know.
much of her background she may not have actually been related to Dorr or Anderson or the
I don't
Andersons.
think
But
that. I feel like that she had to have been.
really, okay.
I think. I mean, I could be wrong. Some of this is definitely theory crafting. I have not looked into all the lore. I did not read every manuscript, so I could definitely be over theorizing here. But regardless, I mean, they answer why she has the abilities at a very surface level. She's related to people who have powers, but it doesn't give me any understanding. Okay, why do the Andersons have power in the first place?
I
Where did
just
this
noticed
seer
my
power
thing's
even come from?
way up there. No,
Oh, you had
my thing
your
was like right.
metal
It was like
tag up.
right here the whole time. All right. All right.
That's a
Sorry.
good place for running your forehead.
Go ahead.
I don't know. Either way, like I think just narratively, the story isn't super satisfying, and it's a convoluted story in general. I think to take the time to really try to piece it or break it all down might be a exercise in
I
futility to a certain point.
I gotta look it up, but in the credits there was some sort of credit to Lance Riddick. I had to wonder,
Mhm.
like, who did he play in this?
He didn't, to my understanding, and this like stuff I did
That's
really
a random
like.
thought. I just saw that in the credits, and I'm like, wait, but who did he play?
Mhm. I want to come back to Saga, but I do want to mention this because I thought this was a cool time. One of the other Remedy games that right now they don't have a really clear way to wrap into the current Remedy universe is Quantum Break, which right now Microsoft still owns that IP. In that game, you
He was in
had
there.
Sean Ashmore. Well, you
He
had
was in
Sean
this
Ashmore
one.
who plays the sheriff in this one,
Mm-hmm.
and then you had Lance Reddick, who I think was the antagonist in that game versus opposite Sean Ashmore. And they have Sean Ashmore in this game as kind of, to my understanding, a pseudo Quantum Break analog character. Like
Ah.
he's not the same person because they don't own that IP, but they're kind of writing it in. Like in the Quantum Break game, I'm pretty sure Lance Reddick played a character name. It was like Marlon Hatch or something. That was his antagonist. The antagonist now to Sean Ashmore's character is
Mr. Door.
whatever his first name is, Door Hatch Door
Warland Door. Oh, okay.
Warland Door. See, and once again, this is a little bit of theory crafting, but it seemed pretty on the nose to me. They're trying to find a way to work in an alternative version of the Quantum Break characters and storyline into this.
Well, they did the
Also,
same. Oh, sorry, good.
I'm sorry, Saga Anderson and Casey or Alex Casey were also in Quantum Break, to my understanding, in a quick scene, which leads to something pretty interesting I want to come back to. But point being is Lance Reddick, I think if he would have still been alive, he would have been the Warland Door character. He would have been the actor for it.
Hmm. I like the guy
So
they
I think
got.
that because he has ties. Yeah, the guy that got's good, but I think because they had ties to Lance Reddick in prior games, I think that was probably their intent was to
Hmm.
bring him on for this one. To my understanding, that's kind of a shout out to him for that.
Okay. And then, of course, there's also the other tie-in of of who Alex Casey is supposed to be. Good old Max
Mhm.
Payne, which is also that's also another thing that like they can't have because of the Rockstar having the IP.
But they
Basically,
just got the
they just
rights
got
to
the
do the
rights back.
remake.
Yeah, kind of.
So I think we'll definitely see overlap there in those Max Payne remakes. And I would be very surprised if they don't model them directly after Sam Lake. Yeah. So I think we'll see a lot of cool connections there. I think we'll see the Quantum Break thing kind of time, which
Since,
I like that. I think it's a cool way to kind of wrap all those
since you
games
bring it
together.
up, Sam Lake was so good in this game. I loved every time he was.
That face.
They
I can't even do it.
and I loved all of his like crappy like Max Payne narrative like
One-liners.
one-liners.
Yeah.
The city's dark and dirty.
His stuff was probably my favorite stuff in the game,
Yeah.
barring a few other things, like just his story, how he played this noir detective kind of thing.
I
Like
love
I really liked that.
especially because there were times when like during some of his like narrative parts where he's all of his detective work, his side detective work, like I loved it at towards the end of his kind of storyline where like he kind of starts to become self-aware as to like his role in the story and whether he's a real person, and the dialogue is like
Yeah.
super interesting where he's like I was made to protect the city, but he just like keeps kind of going on about how like why am I here. I
It's
can't.
really hard to decipher his character because it's like three entities of him. You have the real Alex Casey out in the world, who the books are somewhat not based on, but kind of. And then you have Alan's Casey, who is the ones that's in these stories and detective novels. And then you have the Alex Casey that was in that Tom Zane movie, the little clip in the movie
Oh
theater. Did you
yeah,
watch that whole
I
thing?
watched the whole 15-minute thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's kind of three representations of them, and they all have this self-aware meta kind of understanding of who they are, how they're kind of transcending from the book to the movie to the real life character. It's interesting. It messes with your head, and I don't think I have a clear understanding of it, to
Let me
be
see if I can
honest, but
find
it's
it.
interesting.
I forget where I put it.
Um, I want to come back to Saga though, because she is another sore spot for me in this game. And I'm not trying to come down on any one person, if it's a writer or if it's the actress's performance or whatnot, but I did not care for her performance or her portrayal of Saga Anderson in this game. I don't know what your take on it was, but I know we talked about it a little bit, especially early on. Like when she comes to Bright Falls, kind of starting out this investigation, and people remember her. And the premise on this, at least from Saga's understanding, is she's never been to this town, right? She's coming here for the first time on this
Mm-hmm.
case. She shows up, and this whole town knows who she is because apparently the writing is potentially, rewriting her history there. And one of the first things they say, beyond just the weird recognition of,
Well,
"Hey, Saga, how
Rose is
you
the first
been?"
one that brings up anything.
Yeah, Rose, the diner worker, cafe worker at was it O'Dear
Oh
Cafe,
dear,
whatever it
diner.
is.
Yeah.
She calls her out for basically saying, "I'm so sorry that your daughter died." Now, here's why I take issue with this to a certain extent. And once again, maybe she's coming out from an FBI perspective and she'd be a little more stoic about it. If I was this person who came out of nowhere, I thought my daughter was alive and well back home and never been to this town, and all of a sudden some random person calls me out by name with fairly obvious understanding of who I am, and then by names says she's sorry for my daughter drowning at this town so many years ago, I would freak out. My
Mm.
reaction to that would be far more over the top than what Saga gave. And to be fair, FBI agent, maybe she was trained to be a little more stoic, but
Maybe you
that's not
could
the first time that
argue. Maybe you
happens.
could argue because she's a seer or something in the back of her head is like, no, that's not true. But I don't know. I'm
But she
just.
doesn't even know she's a seer at this
I
point. She just thinks
know.
she has super intuition.
Yeah.
But point being is like that's the reaction she has over and over. That's not the first time that happens. As the story evolves, more people call her out for her, and she never has a real, I think, emotional reaction to that till much, much later in the game. And even then, she only kind of has two emotions. She has the stoic emotion, and then she has angry. I feel like there should have been much more in the way of
Well,
like an emotional
to be
spectrum of how
fair,
you would handle something like
to
that.
be fair, I actually think it's. I think that kind of reaction at first maybe maybe more okay because it's more of like a shock where you're like, what, this person, I don't believe. But then
But it happens two or three more
as the
times.
game goes on and she begins to realize, oh, my, she understands how the story works, how Alan's writing works. When she realizes, oh, my kid could be written out of the story and could be dead, and my husband, when she begins to when that begins to set in, I agree with you. That, because I remember texting you afterwards being like, hey, now that she's kind of understanding how this works, like now she literally thinks there could be a chance her like child is actually dead.
Maybe. I
That
think it
I
was
would
almost worse before she knows the context of that. Like, if
really.
she understands how things work, at least for me, that would give me more understanding of how to save my daughter, how to rationalize it. But if I just have someone out of nowhere have that personal information about me, by name calling it my daughter, saying she died, something about that would really unsettle me. So
And
I don't know. And this is me kind of living that moment. I'm not Saga Anderson, so I can't say it'd be a direct portrayal.
we
But even stuff like when she first encounters the Nightingale fight where this guy comes
mm,
back from the dead. To my understanding, she's never experienced any supernatural anything, and she took that whole scenario like a champ. She's like,
mm-hmm.
"Oh, this guy just came back from the dead. Oh, that's kind of interesting. I would be freaking out.
And
I'm
to
in a
be
town that
fair,
thinks my daughter's died. I
I
don't
just
know."
thought about it, but like you're right on that, and it also like I guess that kind of explains away why, like, down at the morgue, when Nightingale does get up and kills the cops, why the other two cops were so, like, kind of like. Because remember, all the cops die down there, and she, like, busts down the door, and the two cops come in, and she's like, hey, the dead body got up and killed everyone in here. You guys need to clean this up. And then she runs upstairs. And it makes sense why
Yeah, she is too.
those two cops were like, oh, interesting. We will clean this up for you. But it makes sense because they're a part of the cult or whatever, so they understand what's happening.
Well, they're also part of Bright Falls. They're not, strangers to weirdness. But to my understanding, she is. I don't know. The way she handles all of it, the fact that the sheriff just disappears out of nowhere,
He's like,
like
here's
all
the page.
these Yeah, all these really weird things that are happening, and she doesn't have much of a reaction to it, at least from what I recall.
I also wanted to say I loved that character in this game. When every time you stumble upon him, he's like sitting at his board trying to figure out like, because every time you find him, there's a new branching like or
Oh
new
yeah.
dialogue option of him being like, I figured it out. It could be aliens. Mr.
Hmm.
Door, I've noticed he is like he can like move between all these dimensions. I don't know how long I've been here for. I love how every time you
Yeah.
see him, he's like trying. He has like new information as to like what he's seeing, and he's
Hmm.
documenting
And this is
everything.
the Sean Ashmore
The Sean
character.
Ashmore,
So
yeah.
and this I think they gave him a lot because I think, and I haven't played a Quantum Break, so I don't know all the ties, but I think they're trying to mold that character into an analog for his
He's
Quantum
very
Break
like
character.
analytical and very like
Hmm.
realistic about what is happening, and is just like I love that character, and it's just such a small part. Like I don't know, I feel like this Remedy series does a great job of like getting these small part, like kind of similar to a Control, like
Hmm.
the Dr. Darling character. Like that is like one of the best characters in that entire game, and you walk away like honestly, you walk away remembering Dr. Darling more than Jessie to an extent, and like
Yeah.
she's a great character, but she's very I feel like throughout that game she was more blandish.
She's a little flat
She's a
too.
little
Yeah.
flat, yeah. But then Dr. Darling is such a ridiculous dancing around, shaking his butt, you know, it's just like I don't know.
And they've got a lot of references to Darling and a little bit of Jesse in this game too, which is kind of nice. It's kind of a connection.
And they don't
But
touch on
anyway,
it because you see Darling multiple times trying to reach out to Alan Wake through the television, so
mhm.
you don't quite so it is kind of interesting because Alice says at the very end that she goes to Control or goes to the FCB or FBC,
FBC.
and she says that when she got there, everyone was gone. It was an empty building, so she left. But it's like, why
I
was
don't
that the
remember saying. I thought she said no, they found people and they helped her understand how to
did
cope with
she? I
stuff.
thought I literally just finished it. And I thought she said something about I got there and everyone was gone or something.
I'd have to go back and watch it. I'm pretty positive she was like she went there and they helped her understand more about her time in the dark place,
Mm,
and understand her nightmares, and that helped her
maybe.
understand that it was really Alan that was haunting her, and not just Mr. Scratch. I don't know. I'd have to go back and watch it now because I recall that being a little more explicit. Anyway, I want to mention one more thing before we get away from Saga. Because I think if I'm going to take an issue with any character, it's her. So besides the writing just being a little bland and kind of, not having a lot of emotion towards the end of it, her character went down a route and she had a couple of lines at the end. I don't know if you caught it, but really just kind of came out of nowhere. And I don't know how socio-political you want to get with this at all, but
I don't
you
think.
caught that one line towards the end where she was in her mind place. I think she was talking to Alan. It was right towards the end. And she freaked out, saying, I'm not listening to any more white jerks telling me what to do.
Oh,
Did you catch that?
yeah, I did.
I mean,
Ah,
it was one line, but it felt very out of place. And I was very disappointed they took this character that direction because there was nothing in her history that warranted that. There
well,
was nothing about her interactions with anybody else. And here's one other thing, and I really don't take issue with this kind of stuff because honestly, I usually don't care. But there's something that after I found that out, I started looking into a few things. They've race swapped her character. Like there was an
mm,
article came out a while ago. They originally had a white actress for it, to my understanding, and in Quantum Break, they actually have a scene. You know what the big thing that her and Alex Casey do in this game, where they both sip from the coffee at the same time?
yeah.
There's a clip of the Sam Lake Alex Casey character and a white detective in Quantum Break doing the coffee sip, which I think was supposed to be a tie into
Mm.
this game. That white actress was supposed to be Saga Anderson, so they did a race swap on her.
Well,
So I don't know.
I think why they probably did that is to make the shock factor a little more make like because
What
a big
what
thing
benefit did that have?
because you're not supposed to like know because before the game coming out everyone knew her last name was Anderson. Everyone knew it was Saga Anderson, but for even me as a fan, I didn't put two and two together. Saga Anderson, the Anderson twins. I think it makes it harder to see that coming if she was a different raced character is what I'm going at. And as for
Maybe, and if it would have just been the swap, but the fact they combined that with that
the
line,
line, well, why
I just didn't like
the
that. I'm sorry.
the line I think could be explained due to the fact that she's like just getting into the darkness and she's under heavy amounts of stress or whatever. She's
No,
freaking out.
no. I really don't. I don't feel you can
I'm not saying I
contextualize with
believe that.
anything in this
I'm not
game.
saying I believe that. I'm just saying that like that's what I would assume would be the response is that she's under stress and she's wigging out because she's being messed with inside. I don't know.
I mean, you can take it that way if you want. I think my issue is that statement was something that the way it was given is something that you would say if that is this big, aspect to your character's
Mm-hmm.
history that you've been struggling with and fighting with, which would have been fine. I don't have an issue with that being a thing in the character's backstory, but at that moment for that to pop out, it just felt very unnatural and just I don't know. It took
It's,
me out of the game for a
it's
minute.
definitely
It
out of
felt a little
place.
agenda-y. I mean, I'm not saying that for sure. I think Remedy has shown a lot of restraint and has definitely focused on giving their creative vision here. So I'm not trying to say that they didn't have something to say there, but that particular way of doing it, I did not enjoy.
Fair enough.
And I know that can open up a lot of can of worms for other people, but it left a bad taste in my mouth for the whole Saga Anderson character because I was already not a huge fan of how she was being portrayed, and then adding that in, I don't know. I just didn't care for that.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it at that. I'm sorry.
No, I got it. I guess just again on my half, I didn't really see any like to me it didn't really come off as like any sort of agenda, but I am agreeing that like it was kind of out of place, but again, I would assume the answer would be she was her mind's being messed with, she's in the dark place, she just I don't know.
I guess she was frustrated. I mean, honestly, this was
She's
part of the game
incredibly
she probably showed the
frustrated.
most. She showed the
Yeah.
most emotion during this section. I mean, I wish that emotion would have felt more naturally progressed up to that point. It felt like she was just
She should
cool,
have
cool, 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 and then really
there should have
frustrated.
been
So.
like I think what may have like eased the blow is like because of her strong camaraderie with Alex Casey, they're like buddies, they're partners in crime. Maybe at some point if she would have made like a race joke or something and he would have been like haha, classic
I'm not sure it had to be something like that. There seemed to be, I think, a little like to make that feel earned. I feel like there need to be a little more
But
backstory
that's
or
why I'm saying there needed
something.
to be some
Yeah,
moment before where she shows that like that is a funny or that's just something she looked at that way. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. It kind of it definitely comes off as out of left field when she's been so stoic. She's been so even keeled throughout the entire thing. It's like
and
I don't
that's
know.
the thing that while she's frustrated about her daughter potentially being gone, she takes a moment to call that out. Like I don't know. Okay, I will tread
No,
down
no.
a deep rabbit
Again,
hole
I'm
if I'm not
trying to
careful. But
play, I guess, devil's
devil's
advocate,
advocate.
kind of.
Yeah,
I'm,
that's fair.
I don't know. Yes. So we're
So
trying to think of
we
where
talked
to.
about characters. We talked about narrative. Let's talk about. Let's get back to something really good I liked. One thing I really liked about this game, and probably the other just big thing I thought was a huge selling point, is the world building. Like the world building, and even to a certain like the level design that goes along with it. And you could lump a lot of stuff in here. The just straight up artistic design. The game looks gorgeous from an
It
artistic
is.
standpoint. I mean, I've ran mine on the Series X. I thought it looked great. The ray tracing. I mean, when you get to New York, is and everybody said this, but it's very true. Is very impressive. The
Mm-hmm.
lighting, how it reflects off everything, and even like the moody woods when you're going through trying to track down the cultists. Like the environment is
Like you can
very
even
just
see on my
rich.
playthrough that like it doesn't look great, but it still looked really good. Like I think my
It
only
looks
thing
good. I
is I
think
had
better
some
in
frame
motion when
rate.
you're playing
I
it.
had some frame rate hiccups every
Yeah,
now
well,
and
you were
then.
saying you had frame rate issues. You're also playing your PC part with lower. Like, what was your resolution on it? Even like, I think you
It
were
it
running this at lower settings.
It was well because it was weird because I've never seen this, but they had two settings for resolution. They had overall resolution, which I had at 1080, and then they had one that said uh
DLSS.
in game resolution or something. And
Mhm.
that one I had to set down to 720 because I was trying to find like
Yeah, it
the
was your
most
scaling resolution.
yeah, and I was trying to find the most stable output I could. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, so you're probably running this with this lower fidelity.
mhm.
I felt like at least on mine, as I ran on console, I
This
thought it
is
looked good. It
probably
ran
more or less
smooth.
what the Xbox looked like. I would assume this is probably maybe it looks slightly better, but
It's hard to tell. I'm looking at like a thumbnail on my side.
oh yeah,
I thought it looked good. I thought both. I thought the whole game honestly looked pretty good, whether I was in the forest, by the lake, in New York, in a building. I mean, I could probably nitpick some things, but the overall world design I thought was really nice. And the level design I thought was
It's
really good.
great.
One thing I liked about this game and other games like it, a lot of games try to go big, like with scale and do like horizontal level design, which sometimes can feel a little daunting.
This one
I
had
loved how in this game I could go up,
great vertical
yeah,
design. Yeah,
and it made it very hard to anticipate the scope of what you're about to get into. Like one of my favorite levels, well, probably one of the creepiest levels, the nursing home slash wellness center
that's one of the
stuff.
best ones. That's one of my favorite
Like you
levels.
walk up to this house, and it's really hard to gauge how big the house is, but it looks relatively small, all things considered. It's this three-story house with an outside basement, and it has to branch into this, hospital wellness area. Then you can go inside the lake. Like the way they utilize space and the vertical kind of layering they do, where you're moving between floors, and I think they utilize space very, very well. And I never really felt like I was having to go back and arbitrarily backtrack. There's certainly some of that, but it all felt pretty natural, or it gave you like a reason or an adjustment to the world when you came back, like it
That
overlapped with something or something had changed.
that aspect to me felt like a real evolution kind of what they had to do with Control, where Control was very vertical as well because technically it was supposed to. Now, granted, the Control as far as the
Control was
size,
bigger in
it was much
scope.
bigger because like
You needed arenas to
you need
fight in,
arenas,
essentially.
but they did play with kind of the verticality at first, and then as it
Mhm.
kind of went on, like you're right, it kind of expanded out. But I really felt like this game really benefited from like some of the experimentation and kind of different things they were trying with Control.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, so level design, really good. I'm
for
sorry, what were we gonna add?
no, I was gonna. Did you have anything else? I was gonna branch off of that.
No, no, I would say that was a highlight for this game.
Uh,
If I was gonna pick two just worlds in particular, like the scariest for me was definitely that nursing home. Something about I think when especially when we went down to like the watery basement
I really
area
like Coffee
stuff.
World. Coffee World was cool.
Coffee World is pretty good. From Alan's side, I really like the hotel stuff.
Mm, yeah, I like that section.
I mean, most of it was good. Like I think just by any section you pick, you could be like, that was pretty cool. Go ahead and
Um,
branch off.
Oh no, I guess I should also say that another way that they, I'll push that off. But another way that you were talking about how them experimenting with, um, the environments and the locations and verticality and all that stuff. Another way that they experimented with this, like which was really interesting, was a lot of the more detective like scene type stuff that they were doing. Where like you not only would you get one version of a specific area if it tied into the story creation of Alan, but like because he was trying to put together like deaths and scenes and stuff, you would get like 3 to 4 different versions of like a drawn area,
Yeah.
with him trying to like discover more evidence of like the murders and stuff. Like the theater section was really cool. Like uh, I don't know, I really liked
Yeah,
that
no, I agree. So I want to add a little more context here for anybody who's listening and doesn't know how this game works. Because this starts leading into gameplay
because
too. It's
each
not
person
just the
has a
design
different
aspect.
like each character
So
has
they
a
both
different
have
method.
a mind location. So for Saga, she's got this mind space where she basically plots out her investigation. She uses evidence to figure out where things are going. And then you've got Alan, who has his writer room, which is basically a place for him to plot out scenes. I have very differing feelings about each one of these kind of aspects of it. Let's start with Alan, since that's kind of where we're leaning on right now anyway. But he would basically come across an area which would be like, this is a good place for a scene. And it would be like a ballroom, or it'd be like a dining hall, or it'd be a theater, or whatever like big kind of recognizable location is. And then based upon different plot elements that have occurred, he could change how the scene was set up. So, like for example, he would come in and be like, "There was a murder here," so it'd be like he adds the
But
murder
there's a
plot element to
there's
the
a
scene.
cult section, there's a murder, there's
So it'd be
a
like there'd be a detective section, or there was like a devil section. There's a whole bunch of really just different ways that would flip the scene. There's only one right answer, and typically I think that would be a downside here. But the extra effort it went through, like basically when you put a new
hmm
plot and scene together, it reworked that entire area. It wasn't the entire level, but like that scene, it would rework from a graphical standpoint, from a layout standpoint. Often would add little narrative touches that, although may not be the route you have to take to progress the story, it would maybe add a little bit of context. Like, say the answer was, I have to show the murder in this scene. It's kind of like Clue, right? We have to be like Colonel Muster with the candlestick in the ballroom. Like, you had to pick the right elements to make the scene progress. But if you pick the wrong element, it still kind of told a cool aspect to the story. Like, what the cult do in this area versus what did the murder, how the murder take place versus what did the detective do while walking through this area. And it really has a cool visual aesthetic to it.
There
So
was
I liked his version of the Mindscape.
there was one really cool. It was very short, but one really cool section like kind of spooked me that I actually really I don't know. I like scary games, so I like getting spooked. But like one particular part towards like the beginning of the game when you first start messing around with that aspect of Alan's like abilities, you kind of enter like a subway train, and there's apparently like a bunch of people who have been burned.
Oh,
And once you get in it, like the bodies of like charred people are sitting there, and like as you get into the train further, you start hearing like people screaming all around you, and I'm just
that
like,
was intense. Yeah.
and I had my headphones on like loud, and so as I'm going through, I'm like I don't know. I really like they did a really good job with like atmosphere and atmospheric like tension. I feel like was fantastic here. Now, real quick, or did you want to touch on Saga's abilities first before we fully move on?
I do, because it's kind of the other side of this coin. Like, Alan, I thought did a really good job. I think it had some fun narrative take on it. It had a cool environmental change, and it wasn't overly tedious, even though it was simple. Like, there was only one answer. I think there was enough happening gameplay wise and narrative wise that it worked to the benefit of the
Well,
story.
with
Sagas, though, did not. I'm sorry. What were you gonna say?
no, I was just gonna say that like the thing that I didn't like about the Saga stuff, I actually really liked. I liked the idea. I just don't know if I liked the implementation of how it was done. It really like could have been really cool if they would have made it a bit more intricate, or if there was a bit more depth to it. I would have really liked it. I actually liked her abilities and what she was able to do. But again, just the way you kind of go about things is very like simplistic. There's not really a heck of a whole lot of depth. And like if they would have approached that more as like a, I don't know, if there was just more, if it was more intricacy in it, like an LA Noir
feel like
or something.
you weren't solving anything,
No,
which is what I didn't like about. Like, with Alan's, you weren't either, but it didn't matter because it was quick, it was simple, and it moved the story along. Hers, though, her whole premise, for those who don't know how
Oh,
it
here it
works,
is.
is she goes into her mind space, and basically throughout the story, she's collected pieces of evidence. It could be a manuscript, it could be an interview, it could be a photo, and then she has this wall where she basically has questions posed for her investigation. What's the cult doing? What do these symbols mean? And you have to match up these evidence items with these questions. In theory, I think you're right. That's a way to engage with this
It's
investigative
really cool.
process.
It just,
It's got a couple of really big trouble spots for me. For one, there is no wrong answer. Or at least the game won't let you make a wrong answer. So if you have, 5 questions up there and you have to figure out where the answer or the evidence goes, for one, a lot of times it's very on the nose. Like, there's a box that says, what are the symbols? And you have a picture of a symbol with a note saying, look at this symbol. So a lot of times it's too simple, or even if you get it wrong, the game doesn't let you keep it wrong. You put it in the wrong space, and Saga's like, oh no, I'm stupid. That's not right. And you can basically just by trial and error
I did that a
place
lot.
everything.
It's just like, boom, boom,
It
boom,
takes
boom. Okay, if it's
when
in
you
that one.
realize there's not an investigative process here. Like, if I could like go down the wrong rabbit hole a little bit, and then and then at the end she's like, no, that's not working, or you for whatever reason you had to naturally solve the puzzle. Like, it didn't treat it like a puzzle either. I understand how it could be frustrating if they made it too complex and people couldn't progress it and it halted their story progress. So I understand, but it ended up being this tedious thing after a while.
To be fair, though, I don't think this is. I know this isn't popular opinion, but I think it would have been worth it to go more in depth, as you're saying, because I mean, whether
it needed more than what it had.
Whether
I mean,
Remedy
they didn't
likes
have
it
to
or
go-
not, this is Alan Wake is not like it. Probably this game will definitely sell well and it'll be very popular, but to an extent, I feel like this is a pretty niche experience in terms of like survival horror. Always in general is a pretty niche experience. These kind of games never pertain to like a giant crowd. Like Dead Space is an incredible game, but like there's only certain people that love
Horror's a little niche. Yeah.
but I feel like that would have been more worthy of this because it's more of niche. But I don't know. Sorry.
There's a way they could have made this more engaging. I think here's the issue they came about. They made this gameplay mechanic pretty expansive in terms of how often you had to do it. Like, there'd be times I'd come back after playing for 30, 40 minutes. I'd have like 4 case files that all have evidence I have to place. Each section would have like 6 or 7 pictures. And there was a lot of tedious place. I couldn't even tell you how many evidentiary items there were. 100,
A
200, I
lot.
don't know. And it wasn't necessary because, for one, it was tedious to put them in after a while, because once again, there's no wrong way to do it. Even if you don't know the answer, you just place it. So it became a tedious process. I wish they would have scaled it back to where maybe every few segments there were only like 2 or 3 items and some actually challenging questions to put up there, so I didn't feel like overwhelmed when I came back and had to figure out these puzzles. And they also weren't so expansive that it slowed down the progress. Like, if they would have limited the evidence and scope and just had a few very significant puzzles intertwined with this kind of investigative board, I think it could have worked a little better. But at least for me, it became this chore. I would come back, spend 5 minutes dropping everything to the right place, sometimes because it was too easy, or other times because it was trial by error. And there were spots too that if you didn't do it, it would halt your progress. Did that ever happen to you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Whether it be for like story, there was a
Mainly because
puzzle that I
you
had
need
solved.
the. Oh, sorry, good.
No, there was like a puzzle that I had solved, but it wouldn't give me the reward until I dropped the item in the or the photo in the right place. I didn't realize it till way after I'd walked away from the puzzle, and I wasn't gonna walk back and then get the reward. I don't know, the way it halts your progress, I did not enjoy. There's something else I wanted to
Well,
mention
it's mainly
about it.
because
My
the
brain's failing me.
well, it would also halt your progress mainly because like the more evidence and stuff that you discover, that leads to more of her conversations with like the with
Right.
the people like she's able to in her mind palace, she's able to come up with like conversations with
Yeah.
with people. She's almost able to interrogate them to an extent, and it's like you can't do those interrogations give you like vital progress and vital information to help you progress in the game. And if you're not, I mean, I mean,
Yeah.
I would find it hard to miss any of
I get what
that,
you're saying.
but I don't know.
I guess here's the issue too. Is a lot of the things that you're solving on the investigative board, you already solved. Like, you saw it play out. Like, you either saw the cult leader do what he had to do, or he told you. Like, the cult leader straight up tells you face to face, "I'm the cult leader." But I can't progress until I take that item that says this guy's the cult leader and put it on the board. You're solving something that's already been solved by both
Mm,
you and Saga, but she just has to visualize it for a moment before it lets you move forward. Like, it's kind of counterintuitive, because to me, I would think, oh, I have all the information to move forward. And you do, but until she recognizes it on the board, you're halted. I don't know. In
um,
theory or in concept, I like the idea of what she's doing, but from a gameplay perspective, it became very tedious. And one more thing before you hop off,
oh no,
a lot of it ended up being this big exposition dump, especially towards the end. The other
oh
aspect is that
absolutely,
profiling aspect. Like, instead of just, okay, I have to talk to Alan Wake and he's going to pose all these questions, the way it works is you have to click on a question next to the profile page, listen to Alan talk, a new question pops up. You got to click on that question. And for the last like 20
the
minutes of the
last one
game,
you have to do like 10
it's
times.
like 10 of them.
Yeah.
Why? What was the point? Why couldn't, because it was a contiguous like expository dump, just let the thing play out like a cutscene at that point, because that's what it is. The interactivity really just slowed you down and
Well,
made me feel very
I
jarring.
just thought about it, but like, do you think they might have done that to not confuse people? Because maybe they're worried that like, because you're right, all of the information you get from this on screen, putting this stuff on the board, whenever you complete these, she will literally say what just here, I'll put it back. She will literally say what any of that means, and then when you go to the interrogation or the profiling section, they will almost reiterate everything you just found out. So I almost wonder if maybe there's like a sense of like not I think they call it like not trusting the viewer, where they're almost like kind of, I don't want to say they're not questioning your
I think we're a little
IQ,
too dumb.
but they're
Yeah.
questioning your attention span, I guess. Which I guess you could say maybe that's a sign of intelligence. I don't know,
Yeah, no,
but
I just, maybe that's part of it.
they're just like, hey, we
But
need to reiterate. Yeah, I don't know.
it comes across a little too pandering, a little too drawn out. Like, that her whole mindscape dynamic could have been shrunk
It
down
also could
a
have been game
lot.
time padding. Maybe they were just like, hey, we'll
I
reiterate,
do
and
feel
there's
like
some game time padding, you know.
there's definitely padding in this game. Like I beat the game in sub 17 hours. I think the game probably could have been 15 hours and been fine. I know you spent a little more time,
I beat it in like
like
21,
exploring a little
22.
more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I can see that if you're trying to collect everything. I'll tell you, and kind of moving away now from her Mindscape stuff. As far as like side content and whatnot, or searching for stashes, like, did you find that overly engaging? Like, did you like hunting for the extra stuff?
No, to be honest, like once I finished the game, I had already decided I wasn't gonna continue looking. Because you had what? You had the like witches thing that were on the ground, which you would
There's the
put
lunch
dolls. You would put the
boxes. There
dolls
was
into.
the puzzle, yeah, the doll
There's
puzzles.
really nothing extracurricular you got out of any of those. There, see, unlike the first game, the only main collectibles there were the pages, and
Hmm.
for the most part, I felt like all of the pages in this one were very plain sight. Like they were literally placed on your path through the main campaign. So I feel like it may have been impossible. I actually feel like some of them you needed to advance the story. So
Some you did. There are definitely extras that were not, 'cause I found some off the beaten trail, like weird little
yeah,
huts and stuff. But I feel like most of the rewards you get weren't really that beneficial or satisfying. Like the pages and some like what the words that you could get, they all led to like combat upgrades. Most of the ones for Saga were pretty superfluous, right? They didn't really do a whole lot. You
hmm
could hold a little more ammo. You did a little more damage if you got consecutive headshots. Like they were fine, but it didn't break or
I
change the
just
game dramatically.
I just thought about it. They didn't do a heck of a whole lot with his little light bubble thing. I'm just thinking on it. I don't really think they
No, I was a little disappointed in that. Like they use it for certain things early on, but then later on towards the game, it almost like they forgot about it.
that
I don't
becomes
know.
like a forgotten thing. Yeah, later on in the game.
They use his plot writer's room concept a lot more, and then every once in a while mix it with the light. But you're right, that kind of fell to the wayside some. But yeah, most of the upgrades or most of the resources you'd earn didn't benefit. Like so one of the other things that you got were these stashes. We have to solve like little key lock puzzles, and they were fine. But I tell you, there were a couple of them that frustrated me more than anything else because I would like find a stash
There
and
was one that
I'd figure out the
required
puzzle.
there was one that required math that I got mad at. I hated it.
Was it the car one? The
Yeah, the
wheels?
car one. I was like, I looked it up.
That wasn't too bad.
I was tired.
I think I was annoyed because like so I'd go to the stash, I'd solve the puzzle, but then I remember there was one I got bum rushed, and like three cult members
I
popped
never
up
had that
behind me. Well,
happen. Oh,
well, I don't know if they like stopped me while I was looking at. I was about to put the puzzle, and I heard them coming, and then I had this big sequence where I'm like trying to fight them, get away from them. I wasted all my ammo, finally killed them, and then I open the box and I get a little more ammo back. It was a net loss. Like me spending time trying to finish that puzzle actually cost me ammo. And there are a lot of situations like that where the rewards just were meh, which definitely hindered my rationale, or reason, or motivation, I should say, to explore. Not that the world's not fun, not that you don't find little lore things that are kind of cool, but the rewards you get are lacking. So if that's your motivation to kind of do side content, that's this game kind of lacks, I think, in that area
and
some.
I just want to throw this last. This pertains more back to the whole aspect of Alan Wake's controlling of the scenes versus uh, what's her name? I forgot her name. Saga versus Saga's detective mind palace thing. I also feel like just real quick. I just wanted to wrap up that idea because I had it in my head and I forgot. But a big thing that helps with enjoying Alan's side of it a little more is that his is more interactive. You're just like changing scenes and there's more kind of stuff happening versus like her stuff is just like you're looking at a board, put this here, put this here. It's like
Yeah, it was a
everything's
break
very kind
between
of
gameplay.
stagnant. Yeah, with what a little dull with what she was doing.
Yeah, like his stuff actively moves the gameplay along. Like you have to do his thing to get past a point, to open up a room, to do whatever. Her stuff almost always happened after like a big story beat. So everything was kind of usually, at least for me, it seemed like it was usually resolved to a certain extent. And then I put things on the board and then it would move the next chapter along. So it was always like kind of like the lull in between big key moments, whereas his was pushing the story along,
Mm-hmm.
which I liked a little more.
What I just thought about it, but what might have been made hers a little bit more entertaining or more interactive, I mean, is if there would have been something earned out of putting together scenes and figuring out some of the evidence, like what if every time she would like, because what would happen is they would be a main topic, and then under that, on the right side of that topic, you would have to put your aspects of evidence, and then when you had enough evidence to solve a problem, a sheet would pop up underneath it explaining
Saying you
what it
solved it.
saved you solved it and what happened. What might have been more interactive and entertaining is if when that happened, if you actually saw like a clip of what happened, like if there was like a reenactment in her head of what happened here, like when they would say how this person was murdered was they were bashed in the head or something. If it didn't need to be graphic, but like if it reenact, you know what I mean? Like instead of just when you would put together
Maybe.
a scene, all it would say is her narrative voice would come over and be like, "The person was bashed in the head. Ooh, I need to figure this out." You know what I mean? Although maybe that would have been
Maybe.
another padding. I
I
don't know.
think it probably would have been because, like, at that point, you already know what's happened. You probably already knew what happened prior to that, and now you're gonna watch it happen. Like, I feel like that may, like, that particular scenario might be a little much. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have been some benefit to solving those puzzles beyond just her acknowledging you solved them.
Or
I don't know. As I didn't like her mindscape.
Or maybe instead of having the board, seeing as how she's able to have a mindscape where she can create something in her head, maybe every evidence thing, like she creates like herself at the scene of the crime of what's happening, and at a version of the scene of the crime, almost like what they did with Arkham Knight.
The
Remember
Arkham series, yeah.
Arkham series? Like you would like stand there and you'd
You do
have to
detective
you
mode,
could
and you could
rewind
scan.
time or something, and you know what I mean, like maybe instead of her sitting
I
at a
think that would
board,
have been neater.
that would have been more entertaining where you're like, okay, so I think he was bashed in the head. Where's the rock? Here's the rock. Pick up the rock. There's some
Mm.
blood on it or something. It fits in the crevice of the head or something. You know what I mean? Like weird
I
stuff like
agree, and
that.
honestly, man, I like that. Here's the thing, that they kind of did that, but like, so like early on, like one of the first things you do is you're exploring the Nightingale
They
murder
kind of
scene,
do it at
and she.
first, yeah.
But here's the thing, like, so they do that. She finds all the evidence. She acknowledges the evidence, but she has to still go to her mind place to look at it all again. Like they could cut out the whole mind place, and just while she was at the scene, like you're saying, she looks at all the evidence and puts it together, and then she could have a moment of realization there at the scene of the crime, be like, "Oh, this is how these things happen." The mindscape just adds this whole extra just level of extra work. It was tedium almost every time. Very, very rarely did I ever think, "Oh, this has added something to
I don't
my understanding of the
mind.
story," or anything like that.
I actually don't mind the tedium. The problem is the engagement, the interactive aspect. Like if you're gonna make something
That's what
tedious,
made it tedious.
I
Go
mean,
ahead. I'm sorry.
I guess still, I'm just saying, like L.A. Noir had a form of this where you had your
Mhm.
notebook and you would write, but
Yeah,
like for the most part, to collect your evidence, though, you were like actively talking to witnesses, you were actively talking to your people that you're questioning, and you would go to the evidence, and there would be like the cards drawn on the ground of like, but you know what I mean? Like there were ways of
I do.
interacting with the crime scene versus here it's like there almost is no crime scene, or no, you still have to go across to get the
Sometimes there
evidence,
are,
but
sometimes they're not. I think the whole point is there's definitely, I think there's some better way that this could have been handled. It almost feels like they probably came up with this idea of they wanted Alan to have this writer's room mind space, but they knew for this to have, similarity or kind of quality between the other protagonist, she had to have something similar. So they probably came up with this detective wall to kind of serve as her mind place, but I think even though it didn't pan out, they had to keep them for consistency's sake. It feels like they
Alan's
bought in on it just so she'd have an analog to what Alan was doing.
Alan's
I
side
would
was
have,
almost totally pointless though. You almost never went to his time, his
but when
palace or
he,
whatever.
but when he
It
did
was
the
important. It
scenes,
was super important.
it was important, and I think it just made more sense in the context. It did something. I don't know. Like they needed to either simplify hers immensely or should have scrapped it all together. But I don't know. We're kind of beating a dead horse here, I
Yeah.
think, to a certain extent.
So
There's, I think, a world that could have worked, but
yeah.
this wasn't it.
So one other main gripe. I actually think one of the few main gripes I had with this game, I actually wanted to bring up, is while I loved a lot of the atmospheric type stuff, um, it was they did a great job of making things feel spooky, building tension, but a main gripe I had with this game is honestly they dubbed this their first survival horror game, and I'll be honest, I didn't think this was a very scary game, like at
Not
all.
too spooky.
Yeah, other than like the periodic scary face of Mr. Scratch popping up, which happened
Yeah,
like
the
a
jump scare
million
stuff.
times. Other than that, there really wasn't a heck of a whole lot here that like really spooked me. And I don't know, I feel like maybe some of the atmospheric um, parts and I don't know, I feel like there was a lot of wasted moments of tension. Like there was one part where you underneath the old folks home in the basement, it
The
was like
basement.
really spooky. There's this dead body as soon as you go in, and you're down there
I
for
was
a
sure
while.
something was gonna get you. Nothing.
And I'm sure they would argue that like, haha, we subverted your expectations, therefore it's doesn't it better than you getting spooked? And it's like, yeah, but you did that a lot throughout the game. Like that's useful
Yeah.
if you do it once, where you're like, haha, you don't get spooked. Shocking. But like that happened a lot where like I don't
There
remember
wasn't a
really.
lot of payoff to a lot of those
Yeah.
moments. I agree, and this is coming from the guy who is not a big horror fan. And I've heard very differing things. Some people I think have said this is super scary, others not. I found moments of it creepy, and once again, I'm coming from a perspective of people who, someone who doesn't really dig a whole lot of horror games. I didn't find it, especially after a certain point. I think you're right. I kind of saw their way of trying to scare you, after a certain point, it wears off pretty quick. The mood is always, I think, pretty intense. There's certainly
That's
moments
what
going through
so
areas it
sucks
feels
about it is
creepy,
it feels creepy as hell throughout. But
but there's not a lot of straight up horrifying things that happen. There's a
mhm.
couple, but yeah, like that basement. I was sure something was going to
I
get
was
me,
sure
but then
that dude
nothing.
was gonna pop up.
But then nothing gets you for like the rest of that segment. Like it's not just the basement. Nothing gets you in the house. I mean, there was one battle in the house, but it's not like anything big. Like for that, at something at some point should have got you or tried to get you. Something should have scared you a little more, and nothing really happens in the whole segment. It's just a lot of it's about to maybe kind of happen, that never does. So I agree. The payoff for the horror aspect, once again, come from somebody who doesn't want a whole lot of horror in a lot of ways. I even felt a little disappointed there.
I just feel like
At
the
go ahead.
moments of spooky, the parts when you do get scared, again, that stuff is there for a reason because it's supposed to make you, it's supposed to put you on your toes throughout it. So like throughout the rest of the experience, I just feel like there had to have been a couple moments of that, and I feel like here there was maybe one, two moments where I was legit spooked. One of them I can
Mm.
remember was at the very end when you're in Saga's mind palace. There's one moment where you zoom away from the wall and turn around, and there's a guy in a mask there. That was one of the few moments because you're like so ingrained in trying to get out of the dark place. That got me, and then the
I
part
don't
on
even
the,
remember that.
maybe you didn't see it because there's, I think you can, I don't know, but that got me. And then the train section, like, and that wasn't even that scary. It was just the atmospheric.
Psychological.
It's like it was so done so well there that I was just like, my heart was like, oh my gosh.
I think this game definitely leans more on psychological horror, and I think if you're creeped out by that kind of stuff, this game has more in the ways of that. But as far as like the straight up just scary moments, besides jump scares, there's not a whole lot of it. I thought probably the most effective, I think, scary element that still wore off at a certain point, the shadows in Alan's dark place, like
Hmm.
they were. I said they weren't really scary like entities, but there were times that they definitely made me uneasy going through this whole place, right? So the whole thing is like you have these shadows, and most of them won't hurt you, except every once in a while you'll find one that wants
I
to
like
kill
how
you.
they only repeat things he said over all of the games. Like they'll say it's not a lake or something. They'll
Yeah.
say that, or they'll say, just say wake or something.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I was saying about the world building's really good. It's like scary environments and like the psychological aspect. Like they do all that really well. The actual horrific moments, though, I think are debatable. There are some of them, but not all of them. But once
Hmm.
again, it's somewhat subjective. Some of you might be horrified by this game from the beginning to the end. Others might find it, like Chaz, is a little less than overly horrific. But
And I will say, like, one aspect that they did like a decent job of moving it more into survival horror was overall the gameplay. Like I definitely felt like other than other than unlike the first game, this one, man, you have much less ammo and you have much less light to kind of go off of. And
mm,
I feel like that kind of helps it, be a little bit more spooky and stuff. But
Yeah, it bumps the intensity up. I'll tell you, I think I realized, once again, come from someone who doesn't play a lot of survival horror. I don't think I'm a huge fan of survival horror, like that style where you're so limited on resources. Like, I get why they do it. They're wanting to bump up the intensity, so you get into firefights where you have to decide is it worth wasting your ammo. I found it more frustrating than not, though. Like, I had been that one segment where I found the stash, and then I had to fight off these enemies just so I could get the stuff from the
mm,
stash, and it was less ammo than I started with. Like, to me, that was frustrating. And I found more often than not that's how I felt about
I
encounters. I didn't want to fight because I was scared. I just didn't want to waste my ammo and realized I could run past a lot of
I
encounters too. So it's
agree.
just like, see ya.
I think that was one thing I didn't like about this game is there were a lot of times when I'm like, I have like no ammo, and I have no, and especially if you run out of light, it's batteries. It's just like if I have no ammo and I have no light, how do I fight anything? I mean, luckily, I don't know. I was able to make it through. Like you're able to run around and avoid stuff, but
I think the game ends up dropping ammo when you really, really need it. I'll tell you the first Nightingale battle,
that was tough. That was tough. Yeah.
yeah, because at that point you didn't have a big storage of ammo regardless, because you just started playing the game, and I ran through that ammo. I felt like really fast, and I was
Mm-hmm.
scrounging. Now, did it bump the intensity up? Sure, but at a certain point, I was less tense. I was more like, what am I supposed to do here? I was frustrated because I couldn't find the ammo, and luckily I stumbled across some box that had just enough shotgun shells to get through it. But I don't know. There are plenty of moments like that in this game where the lack of ammo resource and economy feels more frustrating than spooky or scary or intense. And same thing for the light to a certain extent. Although I found the light not all that helpful. Like there were times, but I ended up not using my flashlight a huge amount. I found other ways around it, or I just once again avoided combat a lot. So
It certainly didn't. I will say, as opposed to the first game, it didn't feel. You're right about the light aspect. I almost felt like it wasn't as. It didn't feel as satisfying to use a lot of the light stuff versus the first game. I mean, in the first game, man, it just felt more. I don't know. Maybe it's like a because they went more survival horror. You felt less like a superhero than the first game. In the first game, the
mhm.
combat is so fun because like I mean, you have like so many different weapons to utilize against. I don't know. I don't know why I'm dragging on, but I just felt like the light aspect it meant less here, and I just noticed I didn't even know there was a crossbow in this game. I must
Mhm.
have missed the crossbow completely.
I found the crossbow. I did notice that I watched part of your playthrough. You found the rifle. I couldn't. I never found the rifle. I found the ammo for it, but I never found the actual rifle. So,
Where did I get
I
the
mean, that's kind
rifle
of
from?
interesting.
I don't even
It
remember.
must have been somewhat later in the game. So, I mean, I think it's kind of interesting that you can, miss certain weapons that doesn't have a big impact, whether you think that's good or bad, how important the weapon is. But I don't know. The gameplay I think was serviceable. I mean, I think it definitely had moments where it aided the intensity, and then other times I think it led to frustration. It wasn't terrible by any means. It did its job. Um, but there's room for improvement. I guess I'll leave that there.
I guess for me, just personally, there was only a couple other things I want to talk about. Um, let's talk about dance sections or
Yeah,
musicals. Did we
I
actually
was waiting
officially
for this
talk
one.
about that?
Yeah, so this one
Let me
I
see
will
if I
say
can find
I
it.
didn't know it's called We Sing, that was the chapter. So I didn't know the specifics of this. I did hear enough rumblings prior to playing the game that there was this musical section and many people were touting it as I think it was even Skill Up in his video who was like this is one of the best gaming segments I've ever played. And I tell you, I kind of wish I never heard it, like heard those statements or whatnot. Not that I got overly hyped about this game or anything, but there was an expectation going into some of these musical sections that they were going to be, mind world altering gameplay segments. And I think that maybe hindered my enjoyment just a little bit of them because I personally did not love it. Um, do you want to give your take on it before I go any deeper?
I'm wasting time trying to find him. I don't know why I'm doing it. But
So I guess I'll go ahead.
no, good, good.
I'll say, for those who are curious, and this is spoiler for potentially many people's favorite moment in the entire game. There's a segment, well, there's kind of a recurring segment in the game when you start as Alan, where he starts out in this television studio. It's kind of the guest on a fake talk show. And there's one segment you come to where they're like, we're going to do things different. We're going to sing the whole interview. And it goes into the kind of this fever dream rock opera moment where you get spawned to the television and there's giant screens around you, and there's a live action music video playing
I
there
found it.
with the old gods of Asgard, fake band that's in the game. Which apparently, what's the name of the real band? Isn't it like
Poets of the Fall. Poets of the
Poets of
Fall.
the Fall? Yeah. So they're in here, and it's got a lot of just really surreal, and you can see it on the screen. Musical dance numbers with the characters, and it's cool. I mean, I'm not trying to downplay that. It's a cool segment, like thematically, cinematically. The music's fun, but from a gameplay perspective,
It didn't deliver a heck of a whole lot.
there was almost no gameplay. Like you walk through it. Okay, so you're watching and these big screens go by, and you're enjoying the song to a certain extent, but it's not a whole lot more than that. So
It
your mileage on it's really gonna vary.
it definitely
But
in my opinion, it fell a little. It was still fun, but it definitely falls a little more flat when you have played other Remedy games and you have experiences like when you first play the first Alan Wake, when you get to the concert section.
mhm.
I remember being like, what is this doing in this game? It feels so out of place. And I don't know, it feels more impactful at that time. And then when you play Control, because you don't know Control is tied to Alan Wake, when you start seeing Dr. Darling shake his butt everywhere, you're just like, what
Mm.
is this? Oh, this is related to Alan Wake. And it's like, I don't know, when maybe because this game just doesn't have the surprise factor because you already know what you're going in. I don't know. Again,
Maybe it's kind of the opposite for me. I don't know.
you're
I'm trying to
right
think the
though. They
best way
didn't
I'd
really
even
do a
phrase
lot.
this.
They didn't really do a lot with it. It was just like, hey, look, here's dancing and here's music. But
It's a
like,
cool out of the blue moment, right? Like the game hadn't really done like it's done some weird things. It didn't do anything so off the wall as this until now. I think the problem for me is it kind of set in this expectation of okay, this game's gonna get wacky sometimes. This is really the only time it gets this wacky, and I kind of felt like I was waiting for another moment like this. And this happens relatively early on in the game, like the first third. So honestly, I was a little disappointed when nothing else even close to it ever happens again. Not saying it had to be another musical number like this, but something else just really over the top, surreal, trippy. That's honestly what I was kind of looking for in this game, which is
hmm
something out there, very, very Remedy. And this is as Remedy as I think they get. But to me, it wasn't incredible. A lot of people are comparing this to the Ashtray Maze section from Control.
that's great.
Remember that? Which I thought was really cool. And people are like, "Oh, they
That's what
somehow
the song.
outdid themselves with
That was
this."
where Poets
It
of
was
the
the Breaking
Fall.
Benjamin song, wasn't it?
No,
Was it?
it was a song Poets
Oh,
of the Fall did called Control, and it's like da da
oh,
da
that's right. I think I
I
did bring it.
control da 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 da. Yeah, that was another Asgard, Old Gods of Asgard, Poets of the Fall type thing.
Yeah, but I mean, compared to that, I thought that was a more enjoyable gameplay experience. It had the weird trippiness happening, but I could interact with that a little more. Possibly it's a lot heavier on combat. They let you have a little bit of combat in this, which I honestly thought took me more out of the segment than anything else. It kind of frustrated me some of the combat sections in this little wee sing
They
moment.
didn't.
Um,
You're right though. They should have ditched the combat, and they should have went more wacky. They should have done something even crazier. It's like this kind of felt subdued. Maybe it's just like, oh, here's some
Because
lights.
all you
Here's
do is watch. Yeah,
yeah.
all you do is watch it and listen. Like, I don't know how they could have necessarily made you interact with it more, but I feel like something else needed to be there. And even the visual aesthetic, although neat, they do it for a while. This is like a 15, 20-minute segment, depending how long the combat takes you. And there's a point where you're like, okay, that was cool. I'm ready to do something else. The song is fun. The visuals are neat. This is not this elevating gameplay experience to me though. I'm not saying that people can't have their subjective opinion on this being, a major moment for them, but those who really love this as their best gaming moment, I question to a certain extent. I don't know.
I also will say now that since we brought it up, I actually think the music in this game was nowhere near as good as Control or Alan Wake One. Like even though I enjoyed Poets of the Fall, their couple new songs, I just didn't feel like they
Mhm.
were as memorable. Like I don't really remember a lot of the music out of this. Maybe it's because I've only played it once and I've played Alan Wake 3 4 times. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd have to play this. I feel like I need to play this again, maybe in a few months or something, just to see if it sits with me the same way.
Maybe I don't think I'll play this game again. I mean, for various reasons. Once again, not a big horror guy, so I probably won't go back. But I don't feel like there's a lot to really glean from playing this again. I don't know, especially because the story is so. Once again, going back is pretty unsatisfying. Like I'm sure there's lore bits and there's maybe little things in here to appreciate on a second playthrough, a third playthrough, but I don't feel like your overall experience is going to really evolve much. I don't know. I don't know. I wanted more. I don't even know what to say about this guy. I feel like I got left kind of unsatisfied
High
for
and
various
dry.
reasons.
Little,
Yeah, for gameplay a little bit, from narrative, from the wacky moments. Like it had bits of it. I think there was a point where the game kind of set a premise, like this moment right here. I'm like, okay, I'm waiting for that type of thing to happen again, and it never really does. And eventually the game just ends, and I'm like, oh. Okay. And then I try to think back. Nothing about the game was really inherently bad. I didn't hate anything except maybe this some of the saga stuff. But looking back, nothing really took it to that next level for me. I know a lot of people are touting this as game of the year, and not saying there's not a lot of quality and passion behind this, and that Remedy definitely, I think, had probably had a good time making this game.
did you want to
And kudos for
know?
them for going all in on it.
So
Go
you
ahead.
want to know where me, the Alan Wake Remedy guy, where I kind of sit on with it? Um,
Sure.
I kind of agree with you. I really do think the ending of the game kind of soured a little bit for me. Um, I actually think in the end, I think it's still really good. Still one of my top three games I played this year. But I think I ended up coming out of it still enjoying Control and Alan Wake 1 more than this, just by like a hair. I still enjoyed this. Heck, this is something I'm definitely going to probably replay a bunch of times. But like, yeah, I feel like if I were to like grade them, like if you're doing the 1 to 10 scale, to me, Control and Alan Wake 1 are like solid nines. I feel like I would have to give this like an 8. Still super enjoyable, still loved it, but I don't know. It was just like a step down from those two. Even though it's super enjoyable and it's like if you're not like in tune with the Alan Wake with the Remedy universe, this is going to be a trip for you. For anyone who like
Mhm.
has no idea about Remedy, I mean, why are you an hour 26 into this video if you don't? I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I do think though this is a game you want to go into with knowing as little as possible about
yeah.
like moments in the game. Like I didn't know a lot. I knew just enough that some of the high points in the game felt a little lackluster to me, like this one in particular. I think if I would have went into this knowing literally nothing, I probably would have been a little more favorable about certain things. So definitely take that into account. I mean, if you, of course, if you watch this video, I think we've spoiled 99% of the game
Yeah,
for you, so
pretty
it's too
much.
late for you. But if somebody finds this one clip out of the entire thing is skipped here, don't watch the rest of it. Just go play the game. I think you'll enjoy it a little more. So, I said, not
So
a bad game. Oh, go ahead.
if I could just bring up one more
Nope,
ideal.
we're done.
Uh,
No, I'm kidding.
my question with this is just where do we go from here? Are we moving on to Control 2? Are we moving? I'm
Yes.
assuming Control 2 post this because that's one thing we didn't get in this game is we didn't see Jesse Faden. We didn't
Yep,
get
we
anything.
did. You saw Jesse? He
When?
flashes up on a TV screen once. I think it was after one of. I mean, she's not like in the game, but she is in the game. They show her and Darling on a TV like ad really fast, and they pop off.
Hmm. Well,
But I didn't really
still,
want Jesse in this game. Like, here's the thing: I don't want necessarily a huge amount of overlap between these two. Like, they should be their own things. I think when they I'll tell you, in some ways, Control as a concept lessens the impact of Alan Wake just a little bit. Because, like, in the Alan Wake world, the Scratch is like the all-encompassing evil being that's going to destroy the entire world,
but
right?
in the Control
But
universe, Scratch is like
it's
a
just another Tuesday. Yeah,
yeah.
like it lessens things a little bit, and they kind of even allude to that when the one FBC agent shows up. It's like she's not
She's
phased by
like,
anything.
no,
She's
she's
like,
like, this is the
"Oh, this
second.
has happened again."
She's like, this is the second or I think she says second. She said this is the second worst AWE event I've seen.
Yeah.
And she named some other event, which is like, oh, what was that event about? You know?
which I think is fun to have that little overlap there to connect those universes. But if they do too much, unless they somehow make Scratch just like the big bad across the entire Remedy universe, so maybe that's what they're doing. But I kind of hope they don't. I don't know.
No, I agree with you. I hope Scratch is like keep him to Alan Wake, and then I almost wish that like we end up finding out that like Scratch is something that Jesse could have eliminated in like 5 minutes. Wouldn't that be super funny that like who did I say? Who did I say? Did I say Jesse? I don't even know what name I
Yeah,
just said. Like, wouldn't that be
yeah,
funny to know that like Jesse is like could overpower this creature? Like, I don't know. I just think it would be super cool to know that
maybe.
like she's like, because she is like the ultimate. She's like the strongest character I think in this universe right now, right?
I'd have to go back and play Control. I know she's got what a connection to some entity. I can't remember. Not an alien or,
What is
but
it? The
she's
triangle? Those people like the
yeah, man. I'd have to go back and
she is
replay
a
some of it.
she's a got that word. She's a para utilitarian like Alan Wake and like
Hmm.
Saga, where she's like gifted a connection to is it the bureau? Not the bureau. It's the what's the pyramid? It's
Foundation, the board.
the
I don't remember.
board.
It's got a
The
weird
board.
name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she has like a connection with the board, uh, and I guess the service weapon, which is what Jesse gets in Control.
Is
That is
a
a
item of power
object of
or what
power.
object of power? Yeah.
So I'm wondering, is is his clicker technically his object of
Yes,
power? Okay.
in the lamp.
It's just it's so hard to tell like whose power level like we're Vegeta
And this is why
ing.
I don't want. And this is why I don't want them to overlap too much because I think it gets a little tricky, and I think it convolutes one of the stories. Like it either lessens the Alan Wake story too much or it over explains it in some ways. Like the Alan Wake story only kind of works because it's got mystery to it. The whole FBC is all about understanding and providing explanations for all this stuff. So if you add too much of that to the Alan Wake side of things, I think you lose what little interesting narrative stuff is kind of there.
Again,
So I don't know.
I just feel like if Jesse would have showed up, they made it seem as though if she would have showed up here, she would have fixed everything like pretty easily.
Maybe. I hope they don't go that route where it is this is just a complete like a Tuesday afternoon for them. I mean, I think there will be some overlap. There'll be some lore that goes between. Maybe there will be some overlap between Jesse assisting Alan through the mind place, or I don't know. Um,
It's kind of interesting if they treat it as like Marvel, where it's like every time
yeah,
a major villain attacks New York City and Spider-Man is the only person who can deal with it, it's always like, oh, the Avengers happened to go on vacation to Hawaii. They weren't here
yeah,
to help Spidey with this galactic threat. I don't know.
yeah. No. Yeah, well, I think Control 2 is probably next, which I'm almost more excited for now. I really dig Control the way they balance out the creepy, spooky gameplay action side of things. So I'm looking forward to that. And then probably out. Well, actually, probably after that, we'll probably see Max Payne, and then Alan Wake 3,
I'm very curious what they do with Max Payne.
because he's got some power stuff going on too. So I think they'll do some interesting rewrites there. I'll tell you though.
There has to be a way in that game, like kind of in Halo Master Chief Collection, where you press the button and it makes the graphics go back to Combat
Yeah.
Evolved. There has to be a button that lets you switch Max Payne's face to
I don't think they will. Only, I mean, they'd be neat. I think the only reason they probably won't. I have found they're going to rewrite a lot.
really.
Like they're going to take the core of that game because they're going to want to work it into the
Are they
universe at a
bringing
deeper
back
level.
Mark Wahlberg? No Mark Wahlberg.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Here's a question I have for you. I think I know your answer to it, but I'm going to tell you what mine is. So clearly, though, it has to be an Alan Wake 3. And I don't think we officially said it. The way this game ends, and here's the biggest spoiler: no one's really gone anywhere. Alan is still trapped in the dark place, exactly where he started. Saga still doesn't know what's going on with her family. The only, I think, change you really have narrative wise, Scratch might be defeated, but we know he's not, right? He's just
I don't think anything has been solved at the end of this game. Is what I'm is that that's what you're
nothing
asking?
has.
I think
We know that
her daughter is still written dead. She still has the terrible relationship with her husband. I still
as far as
think
we know,
I still think
we just
Scratch is
don't know.
alive. Well, I that's what I
Has to
think
be.
has to be. Alan's still alive. I think Alice
We
is
find
still,
out Alice.
she's still
We
dead.
know Alice is still alive.
Oh
No,
no, no.
Alice is alive.
Oh, that's right. She's still alive. Okay.
Yeah, she's alive because
She's
she
definitely
jumped into
alive.
the
Yeah.
dark place.
Yeah.
She's in the dark place. She's who
Hmm.
was talking to Saga at the end through the phone.
Really? Was that?
Yeah,
I didn't get that. Oh, okay. Hmm.
but regardless, the point being is this game answered absolutely nothing. The characters are almost in the exact same place they started, for better or for worse. I am almost not based upon that. I almost don't want to play Alan Wake 3 because if I go
Hmm.
through an entire game again
I still love
and
the
I don't get resolution, I would have to know. I would have to know going to Alan Wake 3 that they result like, and honestly, I don't think they can drag on Alan Wake's story much longer. Like, to be fair, I feel like whatever Alan Wake 3 is needs to be the end to his story. And only if I know for sure they end things will I want to play it. Because if I think they're gonna string this thing along with the way they did, I felt so unsatisfied with the way this narrative left off. I don't want
I
anything to do
still
with it
love
anymore.
the atmosphere and I love the feelings, the vibes I get from this game. Even though like I'm a bit unsatisfied with some of the narrative elements, like I still love this game. Like I'm still gonna be like super excited for the next one. Like I do feel like to an extent some of these survival horror, like a game like this, it's really not about the ending that's the important part. It's really like if you go back and you play a game like Dead Space, that game isn't really beloved for its ending. Like it's really the gameplay experience throughout
Right.
and
But
kind
this
of
game doesn't have good. Okay, I was about to say it doesn't have good gameplay. It doesn't have good
great.
enough
Yeah, I
gameplay
see what
to
you're saying.
that be what pulls you along. Like, I agree. Like, some games, the pull is the gameplay. Some games, it's the world. Some games, it's the narrative. This game, if it's not the gameplay, which it is not the gameplay that's
No.
going to pull you through. It is serviceable at best. The world is interesting, but even that honestly was not enough at a certain point. The narrative is the main through line in this whole Alan Wake thing, which makes sense because it's about a writer. So it's got to be about the story. If the story is not ultimately satisfying and that's not gonna, at least for me, appeal to me to pull through the rest of the game, I'm gonna be done with it. I'm already not a big horror guy anyway, so if it's just another survival horror game when Alan Wake 3 comes around, I don't know. Like I said, this game has not necessarily changed my mind about playing future horror games. I'm proud of myself for getting through it, and I enjoyed going through my first true quote unquote survival horror game, I guess, but it hasn't rewritten the script for
This
me if
was
you want to look at it
not
that way.
this was not a super spooky
I,
game.
I, I think people are looking at it pretty subjectively. Some people are would rank this up there. I've already seen people try to rank this up there with some higher survival horror games, but I think that's subjective. Point being, the gameplay's not going to bring me back. The story would have to do it, and I would have to know the story is going to have some kind of finite. Not saying everything has to be wrapped up in a bow, but I feel like it needs a conclusion. I need some satisfaction out of this, which this did not give
I
me.
still feel like the first one is it's a better overall experience. It's like
But even
wow.
that story left on a cliffhanger. Like, for 13 years, Alan just gets left in the dark
Yeah,
place.
but
Like,
because like when you go into that game, you don't know what's happening. I feel like you have a better like appreciation for like the gameplay and the sections. I at least felt like I had more appreciation for what was happening in that game, mainly because when you first play that game, you don't know anything about the world or the characters or whereas like when you go into this one, you already have a basic understanding of Remedy, Alan Wake, and it's just like I don't know. This one, while I enjoyed it, I agree with you. It felt I don't know. It kind of just felt like the game rounded the bases. You know what I mean? It was just like, okay, I got like while I'm saying I liked the game, I'm saying I got out of it what I wanted to get out of it, but I can't necessarily say I got a heck of a whole lot more. If that,
mm,
if that makes any sense. Like I got what I was looking
it's
for,
fair.
kind of like Spider-Man 2, Marvel. Like I remember us saying that like we loved the game, but like I got what I was looking for. Like the experience I was expecting, I got. And I don't know if I could say like this is like next level because I don't think I would, but
Hmm.
I
And I guess on the
don't.
other side of it, and once again, it's gonna depend on what you wanted out of the game. I don't think I quite got what I wanted.
Really? Okay.
I wanted the narrative to be a little. I don't want to say better. That's not the word I want to use here, but kind of, if that makes sense. Like, I don't feel like this was a very good self-contained story. And even like a middle ground story needs to wrap up some aspect of the story, and this game doesn't do it. Like, this game just threw a bunch of questions at me, answered almost none, at least not ones that I felt like really mattered.
Introduced new gameplay elements, but they didn't really add to explaining a heck of a whole lot. Yeah, no.
And I was coming at this game for the narrative and just craziness factor more than anything else. I was not coming for the gameplay. I mean, I left with some cool stuff from the world. Like I thought the world environment and all that kind of, or the environmental storytelling stuff was good, and the world building that was good. But I still wanted the narrative to be the big carrot on the stick for me, and that let me down.
So
And once again, subjective. Not everybody's gonna feel that way. I just meh on the story.
so
at the
very
end.
last thing I have to say, as opposed to the first game, the one thing we walk away from in Alan Wake 1 is we learn it's an ocean, not a lake. That is the big thing. You walk away from it. It's like, ooh, what does that mean? Oh, that means that beneath the lake, which is, your gateway to another dimension, there's like a dimension behind that. Now, our new thing that Alan Wake and Remedy fans get is it's not a loop, it's a spiral. What does that mean? I kind of get
I think it's
I
pretty
kind of
obvious
get
what it
it, but
means.
it's like
So he's reliving moments, like he's doing the same kind of thing over and over again, but he's not like it's not Groundhog Day where he's literally doing the same thing. He's basically coming back and doing a similar event a little different every time. He's spiraling towards a conclusion, so he's kind of revisiting
hmm.
prior things while still moving towards an end goal. I'm pretty sure that's what they're
So that
trying
base
to,
so they're
because like
basic
everything's
so they're saying
what?
that so they're saying that every time he does it, he makes like progress into the spiral.
Yeah.
So basically, the next game will probably take place. Will it take place at the beginning of this game then, or at the beginning of?
I don't know what kind of mind nonsense they're going to pull and how they're going to tweak the narrative. I'm sure they're going to do something really weird to reframe everything, but ultimately it's got to pick up from him still in the dark place, and he's got to be reliving some aspect
Of what's
of
happening
his
here? Yeah.
experience there. Now might reframe it. I mean, this whole game can change on a dime based upon what kind of theming and weird stuff they're going to try to throw into it. It's hard to say if you're going to relive exact experiences from this game, but I bet you will. I bet they'll have callbacks to this game of moments that happened here. You'll redo them in the third game, but something will be different about it. Like I think that's their concept though, is this whole game was about redoing portions but still progressing to something else. So
We'll just know
I'm sure they'll build upon
if
that.
it starts out with a fat naked guy crawling out of a lake. They're on the right track. He's on the right spiral. I don't know.
It's on something.
What an interesting way to start off a game, by the way. When that happened, I was like, "What is going on here?" I don't know.
I'll tell you, the first few hours of the game,
Are
I was
great.
pretty in
The
for. Like, it was
first
a little slow. Well, it was slow, but I don't know, I was up for it because I felt like it was getting
when
somewhere.
you're like
And that's
look,
my big issue. The game
yeah,
didn't get
when you're
anywhere.
looking at
That's why I think I
Nightingale's
felt so
body,
unsatisfied.
when you're looking at his body and turning it over and gaining all the evidence, I was so hooked. I'm like, "Oh, this is gonna be like a detective."
Gross.
Oh, well, I was like,
I'm just
this is
curious.
gonna be a detective story almost, where you're gonna like, and it's just like you don't ever get that detective rush of
Yeah, the
adrenaline out of
cracks
it.
in that start showing at a certain point. Like, I don't know. We're beating dead horses
Yeah,
here at this
no,
point.
I
I'm not
agree.
trying to retread old ground. There's fun to be had in this game. I think I've come across a little negative. I enjoyed my time with it. I am not in love with this game. I think it was good. I don't think it was great necessarily. I think you have a slightly more positive opinion than I do. But
Slightly. I'm telling you, the Chazzies is gonna be difficult. Between I don't know if I still have played like my excellent game. Like I haven't played a 10
I
out of 10
agree.
this year. Now while I've played a bunch of sevens, eights, and nines, I don't know because I don't know if I could say Spider-Man 2 was like a game-changing experience for me, or I could
Oh
say
no, it wasn't.
this wasn't a game changer over the previous Alan Wake. Now while still incredibly fun, it's just like I don't know. Like maybe I would say this simply because it's my cup of tea, but it'd be tough between this and Spider-Man. Like I don't know. I could easily see Spider-Man 2 being better than this. I don't know. What about you? You don't have to say if you don't want.
No, I agree, and I don't want to retread our entire game of the year conversation. I know that everybody
What
too
I
is
may do,
lauding this as the best year in gaming ever, and maybe I've missed some of the big gems. I haven't
I'll
played Baldur's Gate
I'll let you
3.
take Spider-Man. I'll take this one just to be fair, but maybe you don't want
Well,
Spider-Man. Huh?
oh, but I think my point being is from the games I played, none of them I think in a couple of years are going to stand out as, man, that was a great game. I'm going to come back and play that game over and over again. Like last year, even though I haven't done it yet, I really loved Arceus. And I know I keep saying it, but
Mm-hmm.
that game was something kind of special to me. Go back the year before that, it was I don't remember which game came out first. It was the Hades or Returnal. Whichever year those came out, those are my games. Like there are these special games that come out that something about it just really clicks with me, and
I've
everything about it I enjoy.
I've still got to play Mario RPG. I've never played it. I wonder if that could be my choice depending on how much I like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one though. I know we talked about this too, like the
Remakes and
remakes.
remasters.
I think it's a fine line. Like the game, I feel like has to reinvent itself a little bit to qualify for that. Like to what I've seen in RPG, it looks pretty one to one. So, I'm not saying it's not gonna be a
That'll
good
be up to you
remake.
guys to decide then when we get there.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Lots of good games this year. I'm still not in the camp of I've come across the
10 out
amazing
of
game.
10. Haven't played that Hades or that Returnal or
Yeah.
God of War
I think part of it is
2018,
because
in my
we
opinion.
landed a little low on things like Zelda. I think we took some bigger criticisms there than I think other people did. Like I think for many people, that's a shoe-in game. Like Zelda or Baldur's Gate or something.
Spider-Man. I think
Those
Spider-Man will be very popular.
I think Zelda's gonna win. I know we're way off the Alan Wake topic at this point, but I think Zelda's gonna clean up. I think people have a hard time not putting that at the top of a lot of lists. But either way, that was Alan Wake 2. Go play it
Yeah.
if you want. I don't know. I don't have a better way to phrase it than
I would
that.
still say if you're interested in this, go play Alan Wake, and then you don't have to play American Nightmare. But if you're interested in the Remedy universe and this game, and I definitely would say the first one is a must play, and I would say Control is a must play. I would definitely say play
Do you
this
think you
and Control.
could do you think you could play this game and enjoy it well enough without knowing anything about any other Remedy game? Not playing Alan Wake 1, not knowing anything about Control. How do you think this game would sit for you? I know it's hard because you have that experience, but I'm just curious what your
I
take would
just
be.
don't see how. I don't see why you would want to do that. To be honest, like,
Yeah.
and to be honest, a lot of the experience with these Remedy games is some of the kookiness, and like just to miss out on some of the kookiness in the first game. I don't see why you would want to. I don't know.
I think you'd be at a detriment not having any background in Alan Wake. I
I
don't think you need to
agree.
play Control. I don't think you need to have played a lot of Remedy games, but I think you need to at least know about Alan Wake. You don't have to know every detail about the first game, but if you don't have an idea about the concepts or what the
You're
dark
right though. I
place
don't think
is or
Control
any
plays
of
a big
that,
part in two, so maybe you could skip that.
yeah, but you need to know the story of Alan Wake 1 a little bit. Because in other words, like you have no idea who Thomas Zane is and why he's important at all. The clicker, why is that a thing that matters? Like this pulls a lot of things from
Whenever they
Alan Wake
bring up
1.
AWEs, you're gonna be like, "What? What is that?" Whenever they say FBC, you're gonna be like, "What?" I don't
Yeah,
know.
but those are things they explain enough quickly in this game. Like they say AWE is an altered world event. Like even if you
Hmm.
don't know any more than that, that's enough. The FBC figure out, okay, they deal with weird things. You don't need to know the control story for any of that to work. But to not know what the clicker is and why that was important, to not know what the darkness is, even not knowing what Scratch is a little bit coming into this from American Wasteland is a little hard.
American
Okay, so
Wasteland.
oh no, I'm
That's
sorry.
Tony
I'm playing
Hawk,
some
I
Tony
think.
Hawk. Man, that was a good game. I
That
admit
was a
that.
good game.
One other quick question. That I don't know how you take this. So in oh crap, American Horror Story. No, what was what was the
American
name?
Nightmare.
Thank you, man. My brain was not working
It's
there.
late. We
At
need to
the
get
end of
out.
that, yeah, at the end of that, it shows that Alan Wake and Scratch, that looks like Alan Wake, are two separate entities, right?
At the end of American, well, at in Alan Wake 1, when they're introduced, it just seems as though Alan Wake is looking at a different version of himself, and he doesn't necessarily know that that version is evil just yet. But in American Wasteland, he already knows about Scratch. He already knows about all American Nightmare ends with just him thinking he's defeated Scratch, and that's
My
it.
point being, though, is in those games, they're always represented as two separate entities. You have
Yes,
Alan Wake, and you have Scratch, who is the embodiment has the body of Alan
and this
Wake.
one
But
introduces them
in
as
this
one
game,
person. Yeah.
they are one person. How does that sit with you? Does that feel like a plot hole, or does that feel like something? How would you explain that away? Like, is it just he visualized himself as the other entity? Like, I think it's a tricky one because in this game, Alan Wake and Scratch are the same person. Scratch is just when he's basically possessed Alan Wake. That was my understanding of it. When the dark
I don't
presence is inside him.
I don't think it's that big of a plot hole. I mean, I don't think in the previous games they make it seem as though they don't really make it seem as though they're separate. Like they show them separate when they're like interacting, but they don't show them in the real world as being two different things. So it's like in the first game when he first sees Scratch, he's in the dark place. They're like surrounded by shroud and stuff, and then of course American Nightmare is him stuck in a dreamlike loop. So it's like those aren't, again, they're like more ethereal places. So it could be, I don't know.
You could explain it
You
away
could
a little
explain
easier
it
then.
away as versus like I just think they can get away with saying, oh no, they're one person. It's whatever.
Yeah, I was just curious. Man, that was one thing I've seen other people kind of bring up, and I was curious what your take on it was. I don't disagree with that. All
No,
right, I'm sorry. I'll stop bringing things back up. We can wrap this up.
no, but yeah, guys, I think shoot, it's something I said on my stream. I'm like, oh, I'm done with Remedy stuff. Well, I kind of want to play Quantum Break now, but
Hmm.
the only thing is that's like a TV show too. I don't know if I want to watch the episodes.
I don't know how. Like, isn't it like the episodes are in the game?
I was just gonna say a big problem with, I think, with that game is if you bought it physically, because I remember the episodes had to be downloaded. So I don't know how you would get access to but the episodes were like an integral part of the in-game gameplay. So it's
You
like
can still download it. If you put the game in, it should give you license to go ahead and access the digital store
they
if
were
you
big
have the
downloads. I
game.
remember at the time.
I'm curious. Yeah, that's one I haven't played either. That'd be kind of curious to check out.
And I want to replay Control. Maybe December I'll replay Control or something. Um, but yeah, like another thing, I want to replay Max Payne. I'm like kind of in a very curious. I've never played Max Payne 1 or 2, and I've heard some people really like those games. I don't know.
They're very
Something.
old at this point, so just
Yeah.
be ready for that. But there'll be a fun weekend.
All right, guys. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this little off brand kind of look at Alan Wake 2. I'm kind of glad we did this because we almost 2 hours. Oh my goodness.
Oof,
Um,
man.
yeah, crazy. So I don't know, Phoenix. What did you have to say before we head on out?
No, nothing. I hopefully didn't come across too negative about this game. I feel like I've become the negative Nancy of our
You sound like you're
podcast a
like,
little
what are
bit.
you at? Like
I do
a,
enjoy games. I
what are you
don't
like
know.
a 7? You're like a 6 or a 7 on this.
Maybe I'm not big on throwing numbers at it.
I don't mind.
Cause I don't know. I guess yeah, it's a good game. Which if you qualify a good game in the 6-7 range, that's fine. I don't think it really goes beyond that, but I think it's gonna vary based upon just how much you really love the Remedy stuff, how much do you enjoy the Alan Wake narrative and kind of its weird convoluted nature. So for me, good, solid experience. I am glad I played it, but that's about it for me.
It's kind of the typical like Alan Wake Remedy stuff. It's like, do you like Twin Peaks? Do you like Stephen King? Do you like weird stories that throw a
It's got
lot
to
of,
check the right boxes for you. I think is
yeah.
the thing. This is not going to appeal to everybody. There's going to be a subset of people who are look at this and be like, ugh, I don't want anything to do
Why
with
is
that
this
game.
singing
And there are
section
others who
here?
will enjoy
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Huh?
why are people singing here and dancing? I wasn't expecting this. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, yeah, there goes a random episode of the ChazmaN podcast. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed that. Once again, do you have anything to say before we head on out, Phoenix?
No, I'm good.
No? We love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Oh, on screen, course, audio locations, if you guys want to check us out there. Also, social medias if you'd like to answer any questions, ask any questions, or we'd love to hear down in the comments on this video. We'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on Remedy, Alan Wake, Control, I don't know, Did you guys like the Bright Falls web series that I watched on stream? I bet no one has probably watched that. I'm a weirdo, I know. All right, well, thank you so much, guys. We love you, and we will see you again. So, bye, everybody.